The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 years. It was a union of 417 species spread across 9 spiral arms of the galaxy. They had laws, trade routes, and peace treaties that kept order among the stars. They believed they had seen everything. They believed they understood war, diplomacy, and survival. They were wrong. Humans had joined the Council only 43 years ago. They came from a small blue planet in an unremarkable corner of the Orion Arm. When their first ships appeared at the border stations, the Council members looked at them with mild curiosity. The humans were soft creatures. They had no natural armor, no claws, no venomous glands, and no telepathic abilities. They were embarrassingly short. Most Council species lived for centuries. Humans barely reached 100 years. The ambassador made a joke during the welcome ceremony. He said that humans were like the small insects that lived in the cracks of old buildings, harmless, forgettable, and likely to disappear within a few generations. The council chamber filled with polite laughter. The human delegates smiled and said nothing. They simply took their seats and began learning the ways of galactic politics. For 40 years, humanity played the role of a minor species. They traded resources, paid their fees, and followed every rule the council created. They never complained when larger empires demanded unfair deals. They never protested when their colonies received the worst territories. They built their stations quietly and expanded slowly. The council stopped paying attention to them. This was a mistake. The Empire was the third most powerful civilization in the known galaxy. They controlled 212 star systems and commanded a fleet of 9,000 warships. Their warriors were bred for combat from birth. Their scales could deflect energy blasts. Their forearms could wield weapons with deadly precision. For centuries, they had conquered weaker species without consequence. The Council always looked the other way because they were too valuable as allies. When the Emperor turned his attention toward human space, nobody raised an objection. The humans had 17 colony worlds and a defense fleet of only 240 ships. The math was simple. They would take what they wanted, and the humans would accept it or be destroyed. The attack came on a Thursday, Earth Standard Time. Warships dropped out of hyperspace above the human colony world of New Eden. There were 3 million civilians living there. Farmers, teachers, doctors, children. The commander did not send a warning or make demands. He simply ordered his ships to open fire. The orbital bombardment lasted for 6 hours. When it ended, there was nothing left. The forests were ash. The oceans had boiled away. The cities were craters. 3 million human lives ended in a single afternoon, and the fleet moved on to their next target without looking back. The news reached Earth 12 hours later. The human government had been preparing for this possibility for decades. They had watched the annex other species. They had studied their tactics, their technology, and their weaknesses. While the galaxy saw humanity as harmless insects, the humans had been building something in secret. Project Prometheus was born in the underground bunkers of Mars. It was a weapons program unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human scientists had spent 38 years studying every piece of alien technology they could acquire. They reverse-engineered shield generators. They improved upon hyperdrive systems. They created entirely new weapons that no other species had imagined. But the true secret of Project Prometheus was not the technology. It was the philosophy behind it. Every species in the galaxy built their weapons to win battles. Humans built their weapons to end wars. The fleet continued their advance. They struck 2 more colony worlds in rapid succession. The human defense forces put up resistance, but they were outmatched. Commanders laughed at the primitive human ships that crumbled under their superior firepower. They sent reports back to their emperor describing how easy the conquest was proceeding. They expected to reach Earth within a month. On the 15th day of the invasion, something changed. A patrol squadron was moving through the system when their sensors detected an unusual energy signature. Before they could investigate, 7 human ships appeared from behind a nearby moon. These were not the small patrol vessels that had been destroying. These were different. The lead human ship was called the Prometheus One. It was 3 kilometers long and covered in weapons platforms that glowed with an eerie blue light. The commander ordered his ships to attack. His weapons struck the human vessel's shields and did nothing. The energy simply absorbed into the barrier and vanished. Then the human ship fired back. A single beam of concentrated antimatter struck the lead cruiser. The ship did not explode. It simply ceased to exist. Every atom in its structure was converted into pure energy in a fraction of a second. The light was so bright that it temporarily blinded the sensors of every ship within 10 light minutes. The remaining vessels tried to flee. They never made it to hyperspace. The Prometheus One and its escort ships hunted them down with surgical precision. In 11 minutes, an entire squadron was erased from existence. There were no survivors. There was no wreckage. There was only empty space where 67 warships had been. The human government released a message to the galaxy 3 hours later. The face of Admiral Sarah appeared on every communication channel in Council space. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. She spoke quietly, but every word carried weight. She explained that humanity had lost 3 million innocent people. She listed their names, their ages, their dreams. She spoke of children who would never grow up and parents who would never see their families again. Then she announced humanity's response. The human fleet was coming, not to negotiate, not to demand compensation. They were coming to show the galaxy what happened when you murdered human civilians. The Emperor dismissed the threat. He had 9,000 warships and the most feared military in the galaxy. He ordered his entire fleet to gather and crush the human response before it could begin. The two forces met in the nebula. It was a vast cloud of gas and dust that stretched across 3 light years. They had chosen this location because they believed the nebula would interfere with human sensors and give them an advantage. They were wrong about that too. The human fleet consisted of only 412 ships. They were outnumbered more than 20 to 1. The commanders smiled when they saw the enemy formation. This would be a slaughter. The battle began at 600 hours, Galactic Standard Time. It ended at 6:47 hours. Human weapons tore through shields like paper. Their targeting systems predicted enemy movements before they happened. Their ships moved with coordination that seemed impossible. It was as if every human vessel shared a single mind. In truth, they did. Human scientists had developed a quantum communication network that linked every ship in real time. Commanders could share information and coordinate attacks at the speed of light. The fleet never stood a chance. When the battle ended, humanity had lost 23 ships. They had lost 8,712. The survivors fled in every direction, spreading tales of the nightmare they had witnessed. But humanity was not finished. 3 days later, the human fleet appeared above them. They did not attack immediately. Instead, they broadcast a message that every could hear. Admiral appeared again. She explained that humanity had the power to do to the exactly what they had done to New Eden. They could turn the entire planet to ash in a matter of hours. The weapon systems were already charged. The targeting coordinates were already locked. All she had to do was give the order. She did not give the order. Instead, she offered a choice. They could surrender unconditionally and face justice for their crimes. They could pay reparations to the families of the victims. They could reform their empire under galactic supervision, or they could watch their civilization end. The Emperor chose surrender. He had no other option. The Galactic Council called an emergency session within hours of the news reaching their headquarters. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in the Great Chamber, and for the first time in centuries, they were genuinely afraid. The from the consortium stood to speak. He was the same ambassador who had compared humans to harmless insects 40 years ago. His voice trembled as he asked the question that everyone was thinking. How had they missed this? How had a species so young and apparently weak developed weapons that could destroy the third most powerful empire in the galaxy? The human ambassador rose from her seat. She was a young woman named Doctor, and she had been chosen specifically for this moment. She walked to the center of the chamber and looked at the assembled leaders of galactic civilization. Her answer was simple. Humanity had not been building weapons in secret because they were warlike or aggressive. They had been preparing because they understood something that older species had forgotten. The universe was dangerous, and kindness without strength was just another word for victimhood. They had hoped they would never need to use what they built. They had prayed that the galaxy would treat them fairly, but they had prepared for the alternative. Doctor explained that humanity would not seek to conquer or dominate. They would not use their new power to bully weaker species. They would return to their corner of the galaxy and continue living in peace. But they wanted the Council to remember one thing. Every species that had ever harmed humanity had underestimated them. The Romans had underestimated the Germanic tribes. The colonial empires had underestimated the peoples they oppressed. They had underestimated 3 million civilians on New Eden. Each time humanity had risen. Each time they had fought back with everything they had. This was not cruelty. It was survival. The council chamber was silent for a very long time. Then, slowly, the ambassador began to applaud. Others joined him. Within moments, the entire chamber was on its feet. They were not applauding because they admired human strength. They were applauding because they finally understood. Humanity was not an insect to be ignored. They were not prey waiting to be consumed. They were a species that had clawed its way up from the mud of their tiny planet, faced extinction again and again, and refused to die. The records of the Galactic Council were updated that evening. Humanity was reclassified from a minor species to a Tier 1 civilization. Trade agreements were renegotiated. Territory disputes were quietly dropped. And in the private conversations between ambassadors, a new piece of wisdom spread from one end of the galaxy to the other. Never start a war with humans. They did not fight to win battles. They fought to end entire empires. On Earth, Admiral Sarah retired to a small farm in New Zealand. She planted trees and watched her grow. She never spoke publicly about the war again, but on clear nights, she would sometimes look up at the stars and remember the 3 million souls who had been lost. She had avenged them. She had protected her species, and she had sent a message that would echo through the galaxy for 10,000 years. Humanity was here. Humanity would survive, and anyone who threatened them would learn the true cost of their mistake.